president said, the president's decided to make some changes, and you're one of the changes. And what we'd like to do is have you come over and meet with the president and basically say that you've decided to go back to the private sector. You know, for me to say that I've decided to leave the Treasury is a lie, and I'm not into doing lies, and so that was it. I went back to my office, latched up my briefcase, and went down to the parking space that's reserved for the Secretary of the Treasury, got in my car, and drove back to Pittsburgh. Well, you know, it's a first in my life. I'd never been fired before. I'd only been promoted to ever higher levels of responsibility. But, you know, it was okay with me because I would have really been uncomfortable arguing for policies I didn't believe in. I argued during the second half of 2002 we should not have another tax cut. That was not a popular view. And in fact, it led to a conversation with the vice president where he basically told me that we don't have to worry about deficits, you know, which I got to tell you was really a shock to me. You know, when the Bush 43 administration took over, we had something over maybe $5.6 trillion worth of national debt. Today, I think the number is $8.8 trillion. That's not an innocent change. It is a monumental change in the debt service that we have to do, in addition to and on top of all of the other things that our country needs to do. You know, I think we only need to look at the fate of other countries who've lived beyond their means for a long time. You inevitably get into trouble. When you get extended to the point that you can't service your debt, you're finished.
If you look at what's happened to great republics in the past, they generally have not fallen because of external threats. They've fallen because of internal threats. Let's look at Rome as an example, which is the longest standing republic in the history of mankind. The Roman Republic fell for many reasons, but three seem to resonate today: declining moral values and political civility at home, overconfident and overextended militarily around the world, and fiscal irresponsibility by the central government. You know, we need to wake up, recognize reality, and make sure that we start making tough choices sooner rather than later, and that we're the first republic to stand the test of time.
The purpose of today's hearing is to examine the fraud, waste, and abuse in the federal disaster assistance programs.
New allegations of massive waste of taxpayer money.
God, the books are cooked routinely, year after year after year.
Disaster assistance money was used to purchase items such as a $450 tattoo.
Some of the U.S. and Iraqi money that was supposed to help rebuild Iraq was instead buying a lavish lifestyle for some of the people in charge.
$20,000 for resort accommodations in Hawaii.
We estimate $1 billion of fraudulent and improper payments.
According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
$1,300 handgun.
All costs were passed on directly to taxpayers.
$400 massages.
What is it you're doing here? You don't have any money. The American people don't have any money in this government. All they have is
$5,000 for a divorced attorney.
This year there will be a deficit in terms of our overall budget and spending this year.
$200 bottle of Dom Perignon purchased at a Hooters restaurant.
And Girls Gone Wild videos.
What is this, Comedy Central?
Some people think that we can solve our financial problems by stopping fraud, waste, and abuse, or by canceling the Bush tax cuts, or by ending the war in Iraq. The truth is, we could do all three of these things, and we would not come close to solving our nation's fiscal challenges. Here's how bad our situation really is. We already have approximately $11 trillion in total liabilities, including public debt. To this amount, you need to add the current unfunded obligations for Social Security benefits of about $7 trillion. Then add Medicare's unfunded promises, $34 trillion, of which about $26 trillion relates to Medicare Parts A and B, and about $8 trillion relates to Medicare Part D. the new prescription drug benefit, which some claimed would save money in overall Medicare costs. Add another $1 trillion in miscellaneous items, and you get $53 trillion. Our country would need $53 trillion invested today, which is about $175,000 per person, to deliver on the government's obligations and promises. How much of this $53 trillion do we have? Zip. By the time today's college graduates are ready to retire, 40 years from now, the only things our government will be able to pay for are interest on the federal debt and some Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid benefits. All other parts of the federal government will be closed and out of business. What about taxes? We would have to raise federal tax burdens across the board more than 2 times today's levels to close the financing gap. Some politicians complain when any tax increases are mentioned. We're facing a more than doubling of federal taxes if we continue down our present path. Remember our debt to GDP? By the year 2040, our debt to GDP will be twice the record level at the end of World War II. And it skyrockets after that. Who's going to lend us money then? No matter what you personally believe should be done to address our nation's deficits, the magnitude of our problem is much bigger than people understand. Let's assume for a moment that all earmarks and special interest pork barrel spending were eliminated. They only represent about 1% of our annual federal spending. What if all 3 Bush tax cuts expired in 2010? That would only address about 10% of our federal financial hole. And what about Iraq? Even if the war ended in 2009, the total estimated cost of the war over time is less than 3% of our total financial problem. Our budget, savings, trade, and leadership deficits individually are bad enough, but in combination, they create a toxic mix that threatens our country's and our families' futures. As the baby boomers retire in large numbers, this tidal wave of spending will reach our shores, and we are simply not prepared for it. And trust me, it could swamp our ship of state. Unlike many other problems facing our country, this one is ours alone. We can and we must solve this one. The question is, when will we? As our nation's founders said, it's really up to us, we the people.
Here's the thing about the future. If you knew that, say, a levee was unsound, and you knew people were moving into the area, and you knew that they were at risk, would you stand by and do nothing and say nothing about it? Of course not. I mean, that would be irresponsible. Yet that's what we're doing as a nation to the future. We know that we have this problem. We know that the fiscal federal levies are unsound, you might say. We know that the structure is not sound for the long term. And yet we're ushering future generations in and saying nothing about it, doing nothing about it. And that's the immoral part of it.
We've been through a lot together. We've met challenges and faced dangers, and we know that more lie ahead. Yet we can go forward with confidence because the state of our union is strong.
I mean, you can look at things 20 or 30 years from now and say, this can't happen. Something will change because the debt is just too big.
There's only one person who has the bully pulpit who can take this issue to the people, and that is the President of the United States.
People may think somehow decisions are made by other people far away, but in a democracy, that's not really true. It is your representative in Congress or in the Senate that is influencing what happens